So by far, one of the biggest mistakes that I notice beginner players and even intermediate players making has to do with their thought process. And specifically, I'm talking about playing too reactively. Now, playing too reactively refers to the style of play where a player is too focused and fixated on the opponent's threats and moves and how to respond to them, rather than pursuing their own ideas and their own plans. And this typically will lead to a lot of missed opportunities to win the game, and I guarantee is costing you a lot of games. So if you want to fix this problem and identify this problem in your own play, then continue watching, because I'm going to dive into some examples so you can properly identify this. Now for this first example, I was playing with the white pieces and I got a very nice position out of the opening. I got nice pawns in the center, got my knights out, got my bishop out, castled, and I had a very pleasant position. As you can see, it's +1 according to the computer. He just pinned my knight to my queen, so I bring my bishop out to defend the center pawn. He brings his knight out. I push the pawn in the center to boot his knight back, and I attack his bishop, which was pinning my knight. Now, in this position, his best move was to actually take the knight on f3. However, he played a bad move. He played knight to b6, trying to be fancy by saying, hey, if you're gonna take my bishop, I'm gonna take your bishop on c4. Now, if I were to simply go through that sequence, if I were to think, oh, well, my opponent has attacked my bishop, okay, so I guess I'm gonna take his bishop, then he's gonna take my bishop. If this were to actually happen, well, then his plan would be kind of justified and he would have a decent playable position. Even worse would be to say, oh, my bishop's attacked, oh, I'm just gonna move it, because now I've really let him off the hook. Now he can move his bishop back, whatever, to e6, to d7. So this thought process, this reactive thought process that I just explained, is not something that we want to have. Instead, we want to be looking at what checks, captures, and threats that we have in any given position. In this position, there is one winning move for white, and it is bishop takes f7, and it is the only check in the position. The point being that once he takes back, I can now take his bishop, and it is actually +3 for white. And it might be kind of surprising because I've only won a pawn, but the weakness of his king, the weakness of this diagonal, is going to prove to be fatal, and his pieces are very passive and I have a very strong center. So let's see how I actually converted this advantage. So he plays knight c4, and this is another example of not playing too reactively. He's moved his knight to the center, attacking my bishop, and a lot of people would just simply move the bishop in this position. A lot of people would just move their bishop to, like, not f4, obviously. That would just hang a bishop. They would move to g5, maybe back to c1, I don't know, because, you know, protect the bishop pair. But I found a good move after knight c4, which is knight to g5, now putting pressure on the rook, because actually when he takes my bishop, now I can take with the pawn and open up my f-file. So I made a good move that was thinking about my plans, not reacting to what my opponent's doing. So, and after a while, I just start bringing my pieces in, and I eventually finish him off, win an exchange, and checkmate him in the corner. So that first example really exemplified the power of playing proactively and thinking outside the box and thinking about what you can do instead of reacting to what your opponent's doing. So this next example, I was playing with the black pieces, and it was quite a long game. It was a Sicilian defense. It was the opening, the opening choice is kind of like out of the scope of this video. It's not as relevant, but we eventually trade down into an endgame, and we get to this position. This is where stuff really gets interesting. So white has a passed pawn, and I also have a passed pawn, so I push it, and we're both pushing our pawns. And this position, I give a check, he plays king h2, and I make a big blunder by pushing my pawn. The only way for white to exploit this blunder by me is to play rook takes f7, which is very hard to see considering that my opponent had low time. By the way, there's no username or whatever for the sides, because this was actually an over the board game, which I played in like an overboard tournament earlier this year. But the reason why rook takes f7 is actually so powerful is because no matter what I do, if I take with the king, then he promotes with check. If I take with the rook, then he also promotes with check. So either way, he's gonna promote. But he makes a mistake and he promotes instantly before taking my bishop. And now a lot of players would instinctively just say, oh, I have to take the queen. He just promoted and my rook can take the queen, so I'll just take the queen. But this loses just due to rook takes f7, and now my pawn's under attack and he has an extra knight. So in this position, white would be winning. But there's a move that my opponent did not see. The move that I play here is very non-reactive. It is not the first move that comes to mind, but it is a check, and that is something that you should be looking out for in your own games. Look out for checks, captures, and threats before you react to what your opponent just did. Rook h1 check is winning for black. Completely sacrificing the rook, because if he were to take, then I would promote to a queen, and this would actually just be winning, because after this, I think then I would take the rook, and then if he were to take, then I could take that rook, but I would just be mating him. He is unable to take my rook, so he moved out of the way, and then I promoted, and then the game's simplified to a position where I am winning, because I'm gonna pick up one of these pawns probably. I have a rook for a knight. It's still complicated, but this is a winning position for black. I genuinely hope you learned a thing or two from this video. The main emphasis was to play more proactively instead of reactively. The next time you find yourself in a situation on the chessboard where your opponent threatens you, think about, is their threat really dangerous? And does their last move fail to a potential tactic you have that could be starting off with a check or a capture? Think about what you can do before you have to react to what your opponent just did. Now, if you've watched this far in this video, just know that I genuinely appreciate you and I hope you have an amazing day. I will see you in the next guide.